Hi, welcome back to Educator.com's AP Music Theory course. Today's lesson is part writing root position triads. So we previously looked at voice leading guidelines and rules, and today we're going to look at voice leading in the context of root position chords and how to connect them together. So the first thing we're going to look at is when the roots of the chords are a fourth apart, and then we're going to look at chords whose roots are a third apart, and last we're going to practice connecting roots that are a second apart. So let's look at roots a fourth apart first. So let's just give ourselves a key context. So let's say we're in C major first, and I'll start with a given bass line. So let's say we have a C going up to an F. And of course we're dealing with root position chords, so this is going to be a 1 moving to a 4. And if you remember from the voice leading lesson, let's start with a nice closed spacing for this first chord. So make a G, C, and an E in the treble clef here. And so the guidelines that we're going to follow for connecting root position chords are pretty straightforward. First of all, between two chords, we're always going to hold over common tones. So keep common tones. So let's look here. We know that we're moving from a C major chord to an F major chord. So of course the C is going to be the note in common. So I'll go ahead and write that in immediately. And then the next rule to keep in mind is to move the other voices to the closest possible note in the next triad. So other voices move as short as possible. And of course, keeping in mind that the goal of connecting these two chords is to have complete triads. So we don't want to be missing the root or the third or the fifth. So let's follow this rule and connect the rest of these notes. So we have the E here, and that will move conveniently up a step to an F. And we have the G here, and this will move conveniently up a step to an A. And let's do this one more time in C major. What about if we just move up a step and make a fresh start from a D to a G? So now we're going from the minor 2 to the dominant chord, the 5. And let's choose a different spacing now for the opening chord. Let's start it with F, A, D. So here we had the third on top, and now we've got the octave on top. So first we're going to keep the common tones. So of course between D minor and G major, the D is a common tone. And then we move the F up a step to G, and then the A up a step to B. And you can see that now a pattern is starting to emerge. As long as the roots of chords are a fourth or fifth apart, like we've seen here, there's always going to be one common tone. So one common tone here. And basically what I'm doing to find the rest of the notes is making sure that we have a root, the third and the fifth, and that the root is doubled. So let's do that in a couple times in a minor key. So what about if we go to A minor? And let's do the same motion from 1 to 4. This time they're both minor chords, of course. And let's choose now, instead of these closed spacings that I've had, let's do an open spacing. So what about something like this? Let's see. How should we do this? So C, A, E. So you can see, even though it's an open spacing, I've still got a doubled root and then the third and the fifth. And now moving to 4, so the first thing we want to do is keep the common tones, and that's A in this case. And then the other voices, the E moves up a step to F, and the C moves up a step to D. And as long as we follow this rule in connecting root position chords a fourth apart, never have to worry about parallel fifths or octaves. Keeping this common tone and moving these other tones up by step will always give this same voice leading no matter what arrangement the chords are in. So let's do that one more time. What about now from, let's say we're going from the 3 chord, well, we've already done that in major. Let's do the 2 chord, the diminished 2 chord to the 5 chord. This would be a good example to do in minor. So let's write the bass line in, B to E. And now I need to make sure that I have a complete B diminished triad. So I've got B, D, F in the upper voices. And here now, in minor, this is a great example of, we saw before in the voice leading example that the 5 chord in minor is usually major. So let's practice connecting this diminished chord to this major chord. So let's keep the common tone of B. And now we see that we are left with this F, which you would think you can move up to G sharp, and this D that you can move up to E. But what ends up happening is that this becomes an augmented second, as we saw in our common voice leading pitfalls. So in this case, we need to make a different solution. So let's see what we can do here. So just like many cases with all this music theory we're looking at, there's always an exception to remember. So let's take this 2 diminished to 5. And so what we're chiefly concerned with here is that we need a complete 5 chord, and we need to avoid this interval of an augmented second from F to G sharp. So let's see how we can do that. We can move the B then. Let me write this chord again, F, B, D. So we can move the B to a G sharp, this F to an E, and then the D can move down to B. So we've got D to B, B to G sharp, and F to E. And we want to make sure that since we're doing some different sort of voice leading from these past 3 arrangements, that we haven't caused any parallel fifths or octaves. And of course, we see that all 3 of the upper voices are moving in opposite direction to the bass. So this is moving up, and these are all going down. So we're not, it can't be any parallels. All right. Next, let's practice roots a third apart. So, for instance, if we're in C major and we're starting on a 1 chord, let's say that is going down to an A. And so this would be a minor 6 chord. And let's start with a different spacing up top here. What about this one? E, G, C. And so in this case, moving from root third apart, there are 2 tones in common instead of just 1. So we can immediately hold over the C and the E. And so now we've got an A, a C, and an E, and we need to double the root. So conveniently, this G just needs to move up a step to the A. Let's do that one more time. What about continuing down here? So this 6 moving down to an F. And of course, I could have just as easily written this F up here, which would mean that the bass is moving up a 6th, but the voice relationships all stay the same. So let's start with a minor chord up here. So A, C, E, and the first thing we want to do is think about the common tones, which are A and C. And then, of course, we need an F to double the root, so the E moves up a half step to the F. Okay, let's do this now in minor. So I'm going to go back to A minor, and let's start higher this time. So 1 to 6, and of course in minor, the 6th is diatonically major, so let's see. We'll use this spacing. And so again, same procedure. Keep the common tones, which are A and C, and then the E just needs to move to an F to double the root of the F major chord. And for the last example in minor, let's go from continue from this 6 down to a 4. So F major to D minor, and let's choose an open spacing this time. So what about something like this? Let's see, A, F, C, A. So we have 2 common tones. And then the C moving to a D. All right, the last kind of root movement we'll see with root position chords is, of course, when the roots are a second apart. For instance, if we're in C major, and probably the most common movement, times you'll encounter this movement, is when we're going from the 4 chord in root position to the 5 chord. So let's practice that. So we've got an F going to a G, and let's just write the F chord like this. So we saw that in roots a fourth apart, we had 1 common tone, and then in roots a third apart, there was 2 common tones. And it turns out that in roots a second apart, there are no common tones, because you can see the 2 chords are just a step apart, so every single note will be a step different. So if we follow the rule about leading the voices to the closest possible tone for the next note, we just get these 2 chords that move up by step, and of course this results in everything being parallel. There's parallel octaves here and parallel fifths here. So for roots a second apart, we need to adopt a new principle of voice leading, and that is to ensure, let's see, contrary motion with the bass. So we want to make sure that, I'll write this over again here, that if the bass is moving up by step and these are both root position chords, that the upper voices are going to move in the opposite direction. And then we'll just try to keep it as smooth as possible from that. So let's write this same arrangement, F, A, C. So what will happen is the F, in this case, can move down to the D, and then the A can move down and double the root G, and then C gives us the leading tone B. Let's do that one more time with a different arrangement of the F chord. So let's say we've got it this way. A, C, F up here. Moving to 5. So again, the A can move down, the C can move down to the B, and then the F again jumps down to D. And let's do that once in minor. So A minor, and we're moving now from a minor 4 chord to the 5 chord with the raised leading tone. So the bass line would be D to E, and let's say we start with the minor chord here, A, D, F. So again, we want to make sure we have contrary motion, so we can take the A down to the G sharp, and then the D down to a B, and the F down a half step to E. And let's do that one more time with a different disposition of the first D minor chord. So what about if we started, let's see, what if we started F, D, A? So this is an open spacing again. So F goes down a half step to E, D goes down to the B, and then the A moves down to a G sharp, giving us this root position movement by a second without any parallel fifths or octaves. Okay, if you're encountering questions like this on the test, you might be presented with Roman numerals only. So let's say you're given 1, 4, and asked to provide all the upper voices. So of course the bass is pretty straightforward. C to F, and I'm just going to use the same 2 chords that we've been using. And then let's choose a closed spacing. So G, C, E. And of course, first thing first, keep the common tones, and then move the other tones as closely as possible, since this is roots moving by a fourth. And maybe there'll be a question that asks you to identify an error, so let's do that. So let's say we're in C and we're looking at these same 2 chords again. Let's just get familiar with moving from 1 to 4. And we have C to F, and let's say it starts with C, E, G like this, and the second chord is F, A, C. So of course this is full of errors. There's here C moving to F and C moving to F, which gives us parallel octaves, and then this C moving to F along with the G moving to C gives us parallel fifths. So second example, let's look at a question dealing with roots moving a third. So let's say we're given this bass line from A to F, and we're asked to realize it in C major in root position. So first we can supply the Roman numerals. So this is a minor 6 and this is a major 4. And we can choose a closed spacing just for convenience. And of course, we remember that there's 2 common tones. So we'll write those first. And then all we need to do now is double the root. So we can move the E up a half step to F. And another type of question with this issue could be, again, looking for the errors. So if we're given this same progression, and the upper voices are all supplied, and maybe, let's say we've got this is the second chord. So immediately, if we've practiced this enough, we can see that they haven't followed the principle of leading all the notes to the closest possible tone for the next chord. I mean, they've kept the common tones here, but instead of taking the E to the F, they've taken it to the A, which gives us a not so ideal doubling, because now instead of a doubled root, we've got a doubled third. So this is a bad doubling. Okay, for the third example, let's practice moving roots by a second. So let's change keys now. Let's go to G major. So I'll write in the key signature. So, of course, the most common form of this progression is 4 moving to 5. And in G, that is a C major chord moving to a D major chord. And let's start with C major with the 5th on top. So again, remembering the rule for this, we need contrary motion. So let's take the C down to A, the E down to the D, and the G down to the F sharp. And there's our progression. And again, we can look at an example of a common error with this progression. So let's take the same 2 chords in G. And let's say we're given the upper voices in this way. And this is the second chord. And so examining this progression, we see that the second chord has a D and F sharp, another D, and another F sharp. So this is, again, another case of bad doubling, and it's a specific case, which is a doubled leading tone. And of course, doubling the leading tone is never a good idea because the leading tone always wants to go up a half step to the tonic, which means that you've got 2 notes that both want to resolve to the same note, which gives you parallel octaves in the succeeding chord. Okay, for the last example, let's look at roots a second apart in minor now, since we've got to deal with that altered 5 chord. So what if we're in D minor and we're moving from 4 to 5, and I wrote this as a major 4. So minor 4 to 5. So of course the bass line is going to be G to A, and we can start with this spacing with the root on top. And now, of course, we have to take care to have a complete chord and avoid any kind of augmented steps and keep everything contrary. So we can move the B flat from D minor down to A, and then the D to the C sharp, and then the G jumps down a third to E. And let's look at this same progression again and find an error in it. So what if we are presented with this? Let's see. D, 2, A. Okay, so this time we see on this side, we actually have a complete 5 chord with a good doubling, but what's happened is that the B flat is moving to the C sharp, which gives us the augmented second. And of course, this is far from being a smooth example of voice leading, with this note going down a third and the D jumping up a fifth to give us the doubled root. Let's write that in there. Okay, thanks for visiting educator.com. This was the voice leading by roots, root position triads lesson.